Imagine sitting alone in your bedroom, the glow of the TV your only companion, when a sound echoes through the night. At first you think it belongs to the terrible horror movie playing on your screen, but then you pause the film and the sound continues. A metallic clang, sharp, deliberate, coming from the darkness just outside your home. You pull back the curtain, expecting silence, but instead you lock eyes with something that should never have been there. Or picture this, an ice cream truck, parked at dawn in the cold of spring. At first it seems harmless, nostalgic even, but hours later it is still there watching. And when you finally gather the courage to look closer, the driver's already staring back at you through his own binoculars. And then there's the phone call that makes your blood run cold. A static-filled voice, playing back your own words from earlier that day. Conversations you thought were private, stolen and weaponized to drive you to madness. Welcome to the price paid, where reality is far more terrifying than fiction. Subscribe now, before the next sound outside your window is meant for you. I was living like a ghost in my own house, drifting from morning to night without truly waking up. After the breakup that bulldozed 5 years of my life, I stopped answering friends, ignored my mother's well-meaning check-ins, and lived on a steady diet of forgettable movies and stale cereal. My bedroom doubled as everything. Living room, theater, cave. The second floor felt like a safe perch above the quiet street, and I convinced myself that if I stayed up there long enough, the world downstairs would forget I existed. On that particular Saturday, I lay half sideways on the couch, a blanket twisted around my legs, half watching some action flick that sounded like pots and pans in a dryer. I remember turning my phone face down when it buzzed again, my mother's name glowing across the screen for the fourth time. The clock read a little past 9. I knew she'd be asking if I had eaten or gone for a walk, questions that felt like homework I had not done. Boredom finally pushed me out of the menu and into a random horror movie I did not recognize. The thumbnail looked like it was shot through a dirty window. For the first 20 minutes, I left the volume low and stared without seeing, until I realized I could barely hear the dialogue. Every whisper crawled at half volume, and every jump scare hit like a car alarm. I started juggling the volume up and down, annoyed, and in a weird way, more engaged than I had been with anything in weeks. The worse the film got, the more I wanted to see how bad it could be. That was when I began to notice the sound. It was not part of the on-screen chaos. A single note, sharp and metallic, the kind of clean ring you get when a hollow pipe smacks something hard. It returned at odd intervals, not tied to a scare, not tied to footsteps or doors. Just a clang, like punctuation from an unseen sentence. I told myself the mix was broken, that the sound designer had looped something by mistake. The film was already a mess. But when I stood to use the bathroom, I did something I had not done in a long time. I paused the movie, as if I had any reason to care about preserving continuity. I came back, sank into the cushion, lifted the remote, and hovered over play. The room was still. The television screen froze on a woman's face mid-scream. And then it came again. The same hard metallic snap cutting through the quiet of my room. I lowered the remote and stared, throat dry. The movie was paused. The sound had not come from the television. I stayed still for a long second, the way you do when you are sure you saw something in your peripheral vision, but you do not want to confirm it. Then another strike, a little softer, like it came from farther away. I moved in that clumsy, careful way that is not stealth so much as denial, opened the desk drawer, and took out a kitchen knife I had absentmindedly left there after unpacking a box months earlier. My heart was pounding enough to feel it under my ribs. Room to room, I cleared the upstairs and then the hall. Nothing. I crept down the stairs and checked the living room, the kitchen, the laundry room, even the tiny closet under the stairs that never holds anything but umbrellas and lint. I told myself I was being ridiculous, and yet every turn of a doorknob felt like a dare. The house was empty. No footprints on the kitchen tile, no open windows, nothing out of place except the way my hands shook. On the way back up the staircase, another clang rang out, but it sounded different, smaller, as if the source was directly outside my bedroom. I remembered I had cracked 2 windows to let the spring air in after a day that finally felt warm enough to trust. The idea that the noise was not inside, but right beyond the wall, made my scalp prickle. I moved to the window slowly, keeping myself to the side of the frame, and pinched a corner of the curtain between 2 fingers. The porch light was off, and the backyard rolled out as a dark rectangle. It took my eyes a moment to adjust. When they did, my stomach dropped. One of the deck chairs was no longer tucked against the railing. It sat alone in the middle of the grass like a prop in an empty set. Beside it stood a small figure, motionless. Even in the low light, I could tell it was a child by the narrow shoulders and the way the head sat too large on the body. Both hands held a length of PVC pipe angled like a cane. The kid did not move until I looked, and then he lifted the pipe and struck the metal chair. The chair rang like a bell across the yard. I flinched back from the window, as if something had lunged for me. It felt wrong in that way. Your instincts know before your brain assembles the details. A child alone in my yard would be frightening in a very specific, solvable way. You open the door, you ask questions, you call someone's parent, but a child who had been standing there long enough to relocate furniture and replicate the exact same sound over and over without calling out for help, that was something else. I made myself breathe in a slow count of 4, as if pacing would fix the situation. Lost, I thought. Maybe he wandered off. Maybe there's a group home nearby. I went downstairs and flicked on the porch light, hoping the wash of brightness would make me feel in control, would signal safety to the kid. My hand found the back door knob and began to turn. A feeling hit me like a hand on the back of my neck. The kind of cold certainty you get when you realize you have been walking the wrong way in a strange city for 10 minutes. I stopped. If the kid needed help, why the pipe? Why the chair? Why not the doorbell? Why not my name? I stepped to the side window near the door, the one with blinds I never remember to dust, and tilted 2 slats open with a fingertip. The porch light threw hard shadows. That was how I saw them. 2 men in dark clothing crouched low to the deck, pressed against the house under the window line, exactly where I would not have seen them if I had opened the door from straight on. One of them pivoted his head and met my gaze through the thin slit. His eyes widened a fraction. I dropped the blind, stepped back, and dialed 911 with a thumb that seemed too large to hit the right number. I made it halfway up the stairs before the banging started. The back door shuddered, wood complaining against the frame. A crash followed. Something gave way, and the footsteps that came after were unhurried, as if the men already owned the space they had entered. I shut myself into the bathroom and twisted the lock. The room felt too small, and the sound of my breath rebounded off tile. I gripped the knife and tried to listen through the thud of my pulse. The stairs creaked. Floorboards spoke. A silhouette passed under the crack of the door. The knob turned a slow fraction, stopped. Then a heel struck the panel hard enough to rattle the mirror. I shouted that the police were on their way, that sirens were minutes out, that neighbors had heard the noise. The person on the other side ran. I heard feet pound down the stairs, a door slam, and the kind of silence that makes you doubt sound exists at all. When the officers arrived, I told the story from start to finish in a voice that did not feel like mine. They searched the yard and the deck and found the chair sitting out where I had seen it. They did not find the pipe. They shone flashlights along the fence line, checked the gates, scanned the street. I had no cameras, no ring bell, nothing to hand over, except my description of a child whose face I had never really seen, and 2 men dressed like they were trying not to be remembered. What made the officers lean in was the mention of the kid. They said involvement like that meant planning, that it was rare for impulsive criminals to choreograph a distraction with a child, that whoever came to my house had rehearsed the steps somewhere else. I kept nodding without fully absorbing the words. I slept maybe an hour before the sun showed through the blinds. In the days that followed, I replaced the back door and added 3 cameras that sent my phone notifications every time a leaf moved. Nothing else happened. No strange vehicles idled on the street, no evening sounds repeated at perfect intervals, no small figure appeared in the yard. Weeks later, friends convinced me to move, and I did, packing that deck chair into the truck as if it might still be charged with something I could not name. I try not to imagine who the child was, or what kind of bargain kept him there in the darkness, striking a chair like a signal. I try not to replay the half-turn of the knob, the breath I took before backing away. Mostly I fail. Sometimes when a pipe clangs at a construction site blocks away, I still freeze, and I still listen to find out if the next sound belongs to me. Spring break was supposed to be an escape, a week where nothing mattered but sleep and silence. For me, that meant coming home, far away from campus chaos, far away from noisy parties on the beach. I liked the idea of losing myself in routine, of making my body sore at the gym before the day even began. That Monday, the alarm dragged me out of bed at 6 a.m. The streets were still quiet, the air cool enough to bite at my arms. I tossed on my workout clothes, grabbed my keys, and left before anyone else in the house had even stirred. 15 minutes of back roads carried me toward the gym. It was all sleepy, cul-de-sacs and neat lawns, the kind of neighborhood that feels frozen in time. And then, at the end of one street, I saw it. An ice cream truck, engine off, parked along the curb as if it belonged there. No music, no driver visible. Just a hulking white box painted with fading decals. At first glance, harmless. At second glance, wrong in every way. It was March. It was 38 degrees. There were no children anywhere. Yet there it sat, silent. I slowed as I passed, glancing through the windshield, but the driver's seat was empty. The image clung to me during my workout, louder in my mind than the weight machines or the bass in my headphones. When I came back an hour and a half later, the truck had not moved. A neighborhood like mine notices things. You cannot park in front of a house for more than a day without a note, a complaint, sometimes even a tow. It was strange enough to imagine someone calling the police. And still it sat there, unmoving, waiting. I circled the block once more out of curiosity, something in me needing to confirm, to witness.
I can't believe this.
The second time I rolled by, there was a man behind the wheel. His face snapped to mine the moment my car came level with his. His nose was long, hooked almost cartoonishly, his beard patchy and sharp. He looked like someone carved from a darker place than the neighborhood would admit existed. He stared. I stared. Then I kept driving, throat dry. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I told myself it was nothing, that weird things appear and vanish all the time. Still, I found myself checking the window every so often, waiting for movement. Hours passed. Sun climbed, fell. I tried to kill time on my laptop, eat, pretend to unwind. In the afternoon, I stepped outside to get the mail. The moment I turned my head down the street, my body seized. Parked 3 houses away was the same truck, angled different but the same. The white bulk against the curb looked too deliberate, too patient. My hands shook against the envelopes. I walked back into the house without running, pretending I had not seen it. Upstairs, in a guest bedroom, the curtains allowed a better angle on the street. I pulled them back by inches, heart hammering. The truck was still there, and as if in answer to my gaze, it shifted position. Every half hour, when I dared another look, it had moved again. Always in sight, always circling. I argued with myself over calling the police. What would I say? That an ice cream truck existed near my house?
I did not do
that
it.
a man with a strange face looked at me for too long? It was not evidence. It was paranoia. Still, I searched my brother's room for the binoculars he used for bird watching and pressed them to my eyes. The truck swam closer.
I have no
Inside,
idea what we're talking about.
the driver was not idling. He was watching me, binoculars already raised, staring directly into my window. The shock made me stumble back, nearly tearing the curtain. By the time I peered again, the truck's engine coughed to life, and it rolled down the street. That was when I finally called. The dispatcher told me calmly they would send a patrol. She said it would be easy to spot something as distinct as an ice cream truck. When the line went dead, I convinced myself it was handled. Sleep came fast that night, but not deep. I woke sometime past 3 a.m, the world dark except for the glow of my phone screen. At first, there was only silence. Then, faint, almost hidden in the night, came the tinkling melody of an ice cream truck's jingle. A child's tune stretched across the stillness. I froze. A small click against the window glass followed, sharp enough to make me jerk upright. Another pebble struck. Someone was throwing rocks at my window.
Just take your time.
I edged to the curtain and on 3 yanked it back. Standing in the yard below was the man from the truck, his pointed features hard even in the dim. But he was not alone. On either side of him stood 2 smaller figures, short enough to be children. They held his hands like obedient shadows. The sight hit me harder than any sound. I backed away, heart ricocheting in my chest, and ran to my father's room. By the time we made it outside, the yard was empty, the night still. We called the police, and once again they searched, found nothing, and left. Days passed in uneasy silence. Then came the news. 2 children, 6-year-old twins, had gone missing in a town 30 minutes away. The photographs blurred into the memory of those 2 small figures standing beside the man in my yard. I could not stop comparing their silhouettes, could not stop replaying the music, the rocks at the glass, the way I felt watched all day. My parents told me to let it go, that it was coincidence, that the police would handle it. But I know what I saw, and I know that truck was not just passing through. It had been waiting, circling, and maybe it was never meant for me at all. Maybe I was just the witness the driver never intended to have. I was used to my phone ringing at odd hours. Being a BMW sales associate meant always being on call. always ready to answer a stranger's number in case it was a lead instead of a scam. But that night, when my phone lit up after 10 p.m., something in me hesitated. I was already in bed, the day had been long, and the glow of the screen felt invasive. I let it ring out. No voicemail. Minutes later, the same number again. This time I answered, keeping my voice polite despite the irritation. Static poured through the speaker, thick and uneven, like the hiss of a detuned radio. I was about to hang up when I caught a thread of sound under it, something that froze me in place. It was my voice. Not just any words, but a conversation from earlier that day with a client, pricing details and a test drive schedule. Nothing sensitive, but it was definitely me. The call ended as abruptly as it started, leaving me staring at the screen, pulse thudding. My first rational thought was that the client had called by mistake, maybe trying to replay the call for his own notes. But why would the number be unknown? And how would he even have a one-sided recording? The next morning, I called the client back. He answered normally, cheerful even, and had no idea what I was talking about. His confusion felt genuine. I apologized and hung up, unsettled but trying to file it away as a weird glitch. The day passed like any other, full of follow-ups and appointments. That night, though, the phone rang again from a different unknown number. The same static, the same eerie playback of my own words from a different call that day. Only my side of the conversation, no trace of the client's voice. This time I hung up immediately. A knot formed in my stomach. It no longer felt like a mistake. It felt like someone was deliberately collecting pieces of me and handing them back in fragments. Night after night it continued. A new number, a new recording. I started answering from my car, stepping outside to see every angle around me. I began triple locking my door, leaving lights on in every room, moving a chair in front of my bedroom door as if that would stop an intruder. Each ring of my phone made my skin crawl. I even went to the police, feeling ridiculous as I explained the situation. The officer listened politely but said, without a direct threat or evidence of harassment, there was little they could do. He offered to look into the numbers, but I could tell it was just paperwork. Walking out of the station, I felt more alone than before. That week eroded something inside me. I was not just creeped out, I was losing trust in my surroundings, in my own perception. My mother was schizophrenic. I had always feared some latent seed of paranoia might bloom in me, and now it felt like it was happening. Finally, the call stopped. Days went by with no unknown numbers. Part of me wanted to believe it was over. Another part saw the silence as a trap. I bought a new personal number, a nightmare of updating clients and contacts, but it felt necessary. For a few days, peace, and then the dread came true. Another call, another static-heavy playback. Only this time, instead of hanging up, I spoke. I said I did not know who they were or why they were doing this, that if it was money they wanted, I had it, that I would pay to be left alone. I gave them my address. Even now, I cannot explain why. The voice that came back was mechanical, distorted, a single word. 11. Then the line died. I loaded my handgun and sat at the kitchen table, waiting. The house was dark, except for the pool of light over the table. Hours crawled by. My thoughts swung between rehearsing confrontations and imagining endings I could not reverse. 11 came and went. No knock, no car, no intruder. Just me gripping cold metal and listening to my own breath. I must have slept sitting up because when morning came, the room looked strange, tilted. That night changed something in me. The calls never came again, but the damage was done. My mind had been bent into a shape I did not recognize. It took months of therapy to feel normal, to stop glancing at my phone like it might spit out a recording of my own voice. I moved out of that house. I changed numbers again. And still I wonder who was on the other end, how they recorded me, why they stopped. Sometimes I think about my mother, about the idea of destiny written in DNA. Sometimes I think about that distorted voice and the address I handed over like an invitation. And sometimes, in the quiet after midnight, I swear I can hear static in the walls, waiting for me to pick up. No matter which story you choose, the thread that runs through them is the same. Danger hides behind ordinary sounds and familiar shapes. A clang from the backyard, a cheerful jingle from an ice cream truck, a phone ringing late at night, each of them could have been dismissed as nothing. Each of them became the doorway to something calculated and cruel. In the first story, a lonely man nearly walked into an ambush because a child's presence convinced him to open his door. In the second, a college student's quiet spring break turned into a real-life nightmare when a man in a truck seemed to carry two missing children as props or prey. In the third, a hard-working salesman was pushed to the edge of madness by a faceless voice using his own words against him. The setting changes, but the mechanics are the same. Lure, watch, unsettle, and control. What makes these situations terrifying is not just the act itself, but the time. Each predator waited. They let hours pass to normalize their presence, to erode their target's sense of what was real and what was not. By the time the victims reacted, their instincts were already confused. A pipe clanging like a movie sound effect. A truck so out of place, it seemed like a dream. A phone call so absurd it might be a glitch. And in every case, the moment of looking back, peeling the curtain, lifting the binoculars, saying hello into the phone became the moment of confirmation. Someone was there. Someone had been there all along. Looking back, do children make it worse? They complicate morality, trigger sympathy, lower defenses. A kid in the yard invites help, not suspicion. Two small silhouettes at a stranger's side blur the line between victim and accomplice. Even the calls, one-sided recordings of the salesman's voice, mirror a child's game of mimicry turned into a weapon. The predators in these stories understood how to twist ordinary empathy and routine into tools. Survival came not from courage, but from hesitation. Each narrator had a gut feeling, and at the last moment acted on it. The first man backed away from the door. The second resisted the urge to confront the truck directly. The third finally stopped answering from inside his house. None of them solved the mystery. None of them caught the culprits, but they remained alive. The scars left behind are invisible. A new set of habits, cameras on porches, glances over shoulders, lights left on, a reluctance to trust what seems normal. It is tempting to believe these stories are rare, anomalies, but their power comes from how easily they could happen anywhere, to anyone. They remind us that safety is not just about locks and alarms, but about listening to the small voice inside that says something is off, even when everything looks ordinary. They're not cautionary tales about monsters hiding under the bed. They're about the predators who have learned to hide in plain sight, using patience and performance as their weapons. If you take anything from these accounts, let it be this. You are allowed to listen to your instincts. You are allowed to hesitate. You are allowed to call for help, even if you think it might be nothing. The price of ignoring those feelings can be far worse. Stay aware. Stay alive. And if you want to hear more true stories of what happens when the shadows in our world step into the light, subscribe now to The Price Paid, because reality is always stranger and more frightening than fiction. Horror is not always a mask or a monster. Sometimes it is the slow realization that something ordinary has become a weapon. The clang of metal in the night, a truck idling on a quiet street, the sound of your own voice stolen and replayed, each of these begins as background noise until your instincts scream that it is wrong. These stories prove that evil does not need to be spectacular to be effective. It only needs patience, subtlety, and the ability to twist what we trust. A child in a yard should mean innocence, not entrapment. An ice cream truck should mean comfort, not fear. A phone call should mean connection, not violation. Yet in each account, those symbols were inverted, leaving behind trauma that lingers long after the event ends. What kept the victims alive was not bravery in the cinematic sense, but hesitation, a willingness to pause and reconsider. The man who stopped before opening the door avoided two intruders waiting to strike. The student who chose to call police rather than confront the truck may have escaped the fate of two missing children. The salesman who finally recognized his paranoia as a warning kept himself from falling further into a trap. Survival in these cases meant listening to instincts instead of dismissing them. It meant honoring the sense that something unseen was watching. The lesson is unsettling but vital. Trust your unease. We are trained to be polite, to dismiss fear as irrational, to silence the voice that tells us to lock the door again or cross the street. But fear exists for a reason. It is an old, primal alarm designed to keep us alive. When it goes off, do not ignore it. These stories show how easily ordinary routines can be exploited, how predators can shape normalcy into bait, and how quickly hesitation can make the difference between escape and disaster. What can you do if you ever find yourself in a similar situation? First, resist the urge to explain it away. If you hear a noise you cannot place, investigate carefully or call for help rather than assuming it is harmless. If you see a vehicle circling your neighborhood, document it, alert others, and involve authorities. If you receive strange calls or messages that compromise your privacy, take them seriously and protect your information. Do not wait until the strangeness escalates. Second, lean on community. Predators thrive in isolation, and silence is their shield. Share what is happening with people you trust, even if it feels embarrassing. Third, remember that leaving is an option. Moving, changing numbers, Altering routine as these choices can be inconvenient, but they can also reclaim your safety. Evil often disguises itself as normal. The price we pay for ignoring that truth can be devastating, but awareness, instinct, and action can break the illusion before it consumes us. Stay cautious, stay aware, and never let anyone convince you that your fear is meaningless. It may be the only thing standing between you and the darkness. If you want to continue exploring true accounts of survival and terror, subscribe now to The Price Paid, because here, the most frightening stories are the ones that really happened.